Well, hello everyone. Welcome. As you can see, I'm not in my usual cave of cool books. There's no cool books behind me. I'm not even in my office at home. I'm here in a little room off the side in a building on campus at one of the universities I teach here in Japan. And I had to carve out a little time, being very busy recently, to be able to record something. I wanted to do an update on my reading for June on the Range, Michael K. Vaughan's great event that he created several years ago, where various booktubers read Westerns and talk about the Westerns they read during the month of June. And coincidentally, the book I'm going to talk about today was discussed by Jim at Mystery and Mayhem earlier today. And just by happenstance, we happen to read the same book, and that is the second book in the Edge series by George L. Gilman, whose real name was Terry Harknett. Now, Terry Harknett, George Gilman, I'll just call him Gilman from now on, wrote a whole bunch of Edge novels, and they proved quite popular. He was a British pulp and men's adventure novelist who wrote a lot in the 70s and 80s, and I believe is still alive, still with us. And I think he has some things to answer for with this particular entry, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Again, I recommend heartily Jim at Mystery and Mayhem's review of this book. He called it the worst Western novel he's ever read, and he would know he's read a whole lot of Western novels. Now, I guess when we talk about worst, certainly the writing of this book is fine, I would say. It's not badly written or anything, so it's not worst by any stretch on a prose level, perhaps. So it's not great prose either. It's right, solid, meat, potato stuff. But worst maybe in content, in theme, and in, I hesitate to even use the word execution, in kind of grimy sense of especially, treatment of women and the female characters in the book. So let's talk a little bit about Edge. I read the first Edge novel a little while ago, actually the last day of May. I was getting excited for June on the Range, and I picked up on Kindle. And again, thanks to Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads for letting me know that the Edge books were on Kindle and available cheap there. And I picked up the first three, and I read the first one, The Loner, Edge number 1, written and I believe published in 1974. This one, number 2, 10 Grand, was published in 1975. Anyway, Edge number 1 was pretty interesting, brutal. Again, the Edge series is known for its brutal, sadistic, spaghetti western style violence and bleak outlook, and for its anti-hero lead character, Edge. Now, Edge's original name was Josiah Hedges, and in the first book, which I talked about in my May reading wrap-up video last month, or earlier this month, about May's reading, Josiah Hedges was a captain in the Union Army, and he comes home to find that some soldiers that used to be under his command had heard about his money, the $2,000 he sent away for his younger brother Jamie to hoard until Josiah Hedges comes home from after the war. And of course, these nasty brutes come and basically torture and eventually murder Jamie, and can't find the money because he refuses to tell them. And they burn the farmhouse down, and right off, Josiah Hedges rides home, sees what's happened, and this last shred of humanity, we're told by the author, leaves him, and he becomes a straight-up killer as he buries his brother, cries over him, and then we're not going to see any tears from Edge anymore. Now, how does he become known as Edge? Well, he runs into some people in that first novel, and one of them is a Mexican, and Edge himself is part Mexican, which gives him this kind of fearsome aspect. He has a very hawk-like dark features and kind of heavy-lidded eyes that are mere black slits, described often by Gilman. So anyway, what this Mexican reports when he comes to the local town to put out a warrant for Hedges' arrest, he just says Edge. He drops the H, and so from then on we call it this hero, anti-hero. I hesitate to use the word hero because he is nobody's hero. Character named Edge. Now, Edge is a real badass, acutely good at killing people, and he's quite brutal in that first novel as he systematically hunts down and kills the 5 remaining men who were responsible for his brother's death. So while tracking down these nasty killers, they've recently taken over this town, ironically named Peaceville. It's been recently renamed by the more upstanding members of this little town in Arizona as Peaceville, and they hire him to act as temporary sheriff, and Edge uses that to help collect a $500 bounty in killing these men he was already planning to kill for free anyway, the ones that murdered his brother. Now, Edge is by no means a nice guy, but Gilman draws the line of making him a complete sadistic piece of shit, which he becomes in the second novel, 10 Grand. Now, at the beginning of the second novel, Edge is still in his 4th or 5th week of acting as temporary sheriff of Peaceville in Arizona, and enjoying the favors of a lovely buxom waitress named Gail, who somehow has fallen for him with for no real reason that I can see, seeing how he treats her. But anyway, early in the morning, we are introduced to the villains of this particular novel, and the main villain is a sadistic leader of a gang of Mexican bandidos. His name is El Matador, which is, I guess, kind of a joke since he's only about 5 feet tall. He carries this blunderbuss, which he shoots people frequently with throughout the novel. And luckily, it's a mercifully short novel, about 130 pages or so in its paperback form. I read it on the Kindle, of course, so it's probably even shorter. At any rate, El Matador and his men, as is their way, attack Peaceville in the early morning, like probably 4 or 5 a.m., murder a bunch of citizens, rob the bank. They also bust into the sheriff's office, and Edge, whose reflexes are super sharp, is still not quite ready to lurch into action when a couple of grinning banditos come in. They find his stash of money, $2,500, and that ends up in El Matador's keeping, and Edge eventually they take him along, and he gets shot, or partially shot, but he uses another bandit's body to shield him and falls down a ravine where he lays for a while. And the book does have a strong opening where this later attack is a flashback. What we open with is Edge sprawled out in the hot desert sun, coming awake while a massive rattlesnake slithers its way towards him, and how he deals with that situation. But basically, from this point on, Edge not only is a wanted fugitive for a previous killing, but he's on the trail of these men who took his money. And along the way, he runs into a woman named Amy, and the way he treats her is just completely reprehensible. In fact, he straight up murders her later in the book after a brief but very nasty sexual assault. And at this point, you lose any sort of interest in what Edge is doing. He's no longer any better than the bad guys, really. I mean, it's a matter of degrees. They are far, far, far nastier in a way. We see, of course, we're treated to a lovely scene where El Matador and his men come upon a sleepy Mexican village, murder all the citizens, the young girls they repeatedly rape and then brutally murder them, which is described in occasional graphic detail, which is very distasteful enough. Now, in an action movie, in a Western or other kind of action crime drama, it's pretty commonplace for the bad guys to do really bad stuff. I mean, the writers and the filmmakers really want you to hate these bad guys, and feel that catharsis building when the good guy serves up some nasty revenge and takes him out. And that's a very satisfying thing. A lot of nasty people do nasty stuff in the real world and are never punished. So that's part of this kind of revenge motif where the reader or the viewer can enjoy some kind of, sense that good will triumph over evil in the long run. And that's really why we kind of go to these kinds of genres, like a Western. You don't need a singing cowboy, Roy Rogers in his white suit and the complete good guy wearing a white hat sort of thing. Anti-heroes are really popular these days. I have no trouble with the anti-hero. But if you think of the spectrum of what a Western hero should be, even when we look in the grimy, dirty spaghetti Westerns of the 70s, 60s and 70s, and this is definitely what George G. Gilman was using as inspiration for the Edge novels, I'm sure. Presenting a bleak, nihilistic worldview where everyone's pretty squalid and mean and nasty and vicious for the most part. So fans of spaghetti Westerns, the most famous ones were done by a director called Sergio Leone. He made several notable films, but he's famous especially for the three he made with Clint Eastwood, starting with A Fistful of Dollars in 1964, For a Few Dollars More, and then culminating in The Great, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly movie, so famous for its music as well as other things. If you look in that movie, of course, Clint Eastwood is called the good. He does some kind of anti-heroic action in there, and they have scrawled under him in red cursive lettering on the screen, the good. So good is a relative term, of course, but even that character is not attacking women, will defend women. A woman who's in trouble will defend someone who's being bullied eventually by, challenging the person. Edge is more like the Lee Van Cleef bad character. He won't necessarily kill someone that's innocent, but he's not averse to, brutalizing them to get his way. He's straight arrow going for what he wants, and in this case, it's his money back. And after what he does to this Amy character, you don't really feel any sympathy whatsoever for him. I know you're not really supposed to, perhaps, but there is a line, and I think Gilman crosses that line here. And the misogyny and mistreatment and just terrible assault on women and humans in general and animals. We know El Matador is a bad guy because he shoots a dog for no apparent reason. That's another kind of cliche, I guess, to show just how bad he is. But eventually, to get back to the plot briefly, Edge comes to this village where El Matador and his men have massacred all the people and raped the women. There's bodies everywhere, but there was one that they left behind. They didn't know he was there, and that's a very old, weather-beaten, broken down old man who used to be a similar style of bandit when he was younger, and is a pretty nasty piece of work in his own right. His name is Luis, and Edge reluctantly kind of rides along with him because this Luis guy can lead him to this bandit fortress where Edge figures these El Matador and his men are hiding out. Eventually, through a number of adventures, they end up with El Matador and his men, some semi-captive, leading to this place where Luis, supposedly the only survivor left of this group that stole 10,000 in American dinero, the 10 grand of the title, has it buried somewhere, and it ends up in this kind of showdown of sorts where Edge takes advantage of the situation and takes out El Matador. Certainly not nearly in as brutal fashion as I would have liked, considering how reprehensible El Matador was. And then Edge is off to try to find this 10 grand, basically a kind of wild goose chase with an ironic ending. But by that point, I'm kind of past caring because we have some more, kind of nasty violence against women that results once again, as well as nasty violence against men as well, I suppose. But anyway, Jim at Mystery Mayhem does a much better job than me, much more pithy. He breaks down some of the nasty acts that happen to women in this book, and it's just distasteful. You know, I mean, it's one. Edge does kill a woman in the very first novel, but he's basically helped. She's mortally wounded and asked to be put out of her misery, and Edge obliges. We don't get the indication that he is overly broken up about it, but we also don't get the indication that he's, you know, enjoying it either, like he seems to when he kills the woman in this book. Anyhow, I'm very glad to hear that, you know, because this sadism in this book just kind of put me off of this genre for a while. Not Westerns by any stretch, but by this kind of adult Western. Now this is not an adult Western like The Trailsman or The Gunsmith. There's not extended sex scenes or anything like that. There are some, you know, there is some sexual violence here and there and some sex referred to, but not really in any sort of blow-by-blow pornographic detail that is in the other books. But anyway, I was just kind of done with this genre of subgenre of just really nihilistic, bleak, everyone's a scumbag sort of characters. And glad to hear from what Jim says and from the other commenters say on his video from earlier today that this seems to be kind of an anomaly, that the other Edge books aren't. Edge doesn't act nearly in this way, in this sort of you know, fiendishly anti-woman way. I'm sure he's not warm and fuzzy by any stretch. That's not really what Gilman's going for here. But other people have raved about this series and talked about how cool it was and the good action and all that. And so I'm glad to hear that maybe some of the later installments get back to a little more fun, albeit I'm sure still quite violent and extreme. This is often called the most violent Western series ever written. I'm not sure if it deserves that appellation or not. But anyway, while I did enjoy the first one, as brutal as it was, this one was not really, I wasn't really that keen on. I did finish it. I don't think it's as well written or written as with as much care as the first novel. A little more slapdash in this one, but still, you know, compellingly enough written in its prose, but just left a foul taste in the mouth. And I have since promptly washed that out by reading, starting a Larry and Stretch novel. I'm reading Texans Walk Proud, the supposedly sixth installment in the extremely long-running Larry and Stretch series by Leonard B. Mears, writing as Marshall Grover. And again, that's got plenty of action. In the first page, there's a shootout as Larry and Stretch swoop in to try to save a guy who's being bushwhacked. And a couple of scumbags are smoking corpses on the ground from Larry's 6-gun before we're on page 2, really. But the characters of Larry and Stretch are just great. They're not goody two-shoes, but they're certainly roguish and ride the line of the law, but they're straight shooters and always there to help people and the underdog and rescue maidens in distress, and just like what you would like and what we readers of Westerns and similar adventure yarns prefer our heroes to be like. They can have rough edges. They can be handy with a gun and their fists and ready to throw down when necessary. But we like them to be on the side of the good and do good deeds. So again, this is not a recommendation for Edge number 2, although I will eventually check out more of the series to see if they course correct, if Gilman course corrected. And I'm going to be back in a little while with a book haul with some Westerns I hope to be able to share with you that are part of a book haul, my first ever book haul on this channel. My package coming from the States that was full of a bunch of these new books kind of was waylaid in Los Angeles for over a week, but it seems to be making its way to me here now, and hopefully by the last week of June on the Range, I'll be able to show off some of my new Western additions to my collection. And I'll also be shortly finished with this Larry and Stretch novel. Already after an hour, or not even that, I'm halfway plus through. So they're short and punchy things, and a lot of fun. So I'll be talking about that one as well. I hope everyone is enjoying their Western reading or whatever reading you're getting up to in June. And I will check you next time. Thanks for watching, and be sure to go check out Jim's video where he does a really good job taking this book to task, and the writer as well, I think. Thank you, and we'll catch you again.